Welcome. In previous videos, I talked about the mind and I talked about the body, and this is probably one of the most important videos where I talk about the spirit and how the ego separates us from our deeper connection, our inner knowing, and casts a spell. I want to talk a bit about the spirit or the soul, however you phrase it for yourself, because the deepest truth of who we are is that we're not just a mind and we're not just our body. We're something much more eternal, connected, and whole. From the time that we're small, we are taught this survival based living and ego that have taught us a story about ourselves, that we are separate from each other, separate from nature, separate from the divine creation, that we are, whether we call it God or Gaia or Source or the universe or something else entirely. But this separation is not true, and it's part of the lie of imperfection. When we believe it, we begin to live from that place of ego, from that fear, from that scarcity, and from that sense of competition, which leads us to believe that we are imperfect, that there is something more that we need to obtain or strive for, something lacking in ourselves. And it simply is just not true. We forget that we are some part of something far bigger than our individual lives. We begin to kind of check out and no longer listen to our inner knowing, because the ego with the fear and the judgment really begins to take over. And so here's the shift in perspective that I just want to invite you to try on. And that it's not that you are a human being that happens to have a soul, but that you are a soul having a human experience. This body, this personality, these stories, they are all temporary. They are the vehicle that your soul chose to experience life through. And when you remember this, the urgency to prove yourself, to be perfect, to earn worth, really starts to fade away, because you realize how unnecessary it all is. You realize your worth has been there all along. You are right where you need to be and who you need to be. Remember, my first kind of deeper look into this was with a spiritual advisor when I was going through a really hard, traumatic breakup. There had been a lot of fighting, a lot of abuse. I had already really been in therapy and doing medications for some time and just really not growing in any sort of way. And I was at a point, very low point, where I felt very helpless. And so I had spoken to a friend who had this spiritual advisor, and we got together, and he immediately kind of said to me, the anxiety you're feeling is a side effect of something else. And I kind of looked at him inquisitively and annoyed, because I'm like, oh, I've gone through all this therapy and I've never heard anybody say this. And we dug deeper, and what I realized was I had identified as my condition, as my anxiety, as somebody with mental health issues, and I had really cut off my inner voice. And what I came to realize at that time in my healing was that that anxiety was a side effect of my abandonment issues, which at the time I thought had to do with my parents, and thus the breakup was this form of abandonment, and that's why I was feeling so lost and empty. But further down my path, what I came to find out and realize was I had actually abandoned myself. And it was my sense of self-abandonment that was leaving me lost and feeling out of control. But because I had never really looked at it from that perspective, I was really just continuing in a loop of the same negativity and the same conversations. So I want to invite you to really think about it in terms of stripping away the noise of ego and conditioning, because what's left is your inner knowing. It's that clear, quiet voice that speaks to you in those moments where all the chaos of the ego, the judge, the victim, all the conditioning falls away. It speaks in feelings, it speaks in your intuition, in those little flashes of insight that seem to come out of nowhere. And the more you listen to it, the more aligned your outer life becomes with that inner truth. You hear people talk about raising your vibration or manifesting. Well, this is a part of that. Because if your energy is always running around in a low state with negative dialogue, your vibration is at a low state. And when you become aligned, that's where the word manifest really comes into play, because you align with all the positive things that are out there for you versus being in a lower energy state. And that's why I think, understanding spirit is one of the most valuable tools that you can acquire. And so if you're ready, we're going to try this on by a few practices that I hope you enjoy and use them as much as you can. And practice number 1 has to do with your I am. And you may have heard this expression before. And we're going to do some I am journal prompts. Because the I am that you identify with is really in direct correlation with the vibration and your perspective on life and how you identify. So what we're going to do is write down the old I am statements that you've been carrying, the ones that are kind of shaped by fear, by ego, by the conditioning, and we're going to rewrite them into what's true. For example, if you tend to say a lot like, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, we're going to turn that into, I am enough. And you're going to write that down. I am alone or I'm lonely becomes I am connected. Something like I am broken becomes I am whole. If you're feeling like you're constantly dealing with illness, then it should be I am healthy. And you should repeat these positive statements as much as you can, because these will speak to your spirit, your mind, and your body. These new I am statements should really become seeds that you plant into your daily life to help raise that vibration, and you'll find that you'll begin to come in alignment with them. Now, practice 2, nature connection. You know how everyone loves to get out into nature, and that's because it reminds us of our greater connection to the universe. You hear people talking about short walks help anxiety. Well, to me, this is a no-brainer. So I want you to step outside, and if you can't, just visualize. But I want you to get out in nature, or visualize yourself in nature. And I just want you to feel your feet on the earth. And if you're visualizing, you might be at a beach, you might be in a huge flowery meadow. But I really want you to take the time to notice things like the wind blowing through the trees, all the beautiful shades of green of all the leaves, maybe the scent of the flowers or the sounds of the birds singing. And more importantly, I want you to imagine that energy extending from the ground, from the trees, from the sky, into your body until you feel yourself as part of that living world. And this is a powerful reminder that you are always connected and you are never truly separate from that beautiful life force of creation. And now the third practice that I would like for you to try, and this is going to take you getting a few supplies, but I want you to think about the I am mask that you wear, because the ego really helps us to form a mask that version of ourselves that we portray out into the world. And so in this exercise, I want you to either go to some type of maybe arts and crafts place where you can buy just kind of a white mask, probably like a Mardi Gras masquerade mask, or possibly even make one just from a sheet of paper and cut out little eye holes. And on the front of this mask, I want you to again write the I ams or who you think you are, how you identify yourself. That might be mother, that might be father, that might be boss, that might be the athlete, that might be the caretaker. Any labels that you've identified yourself with, and I want you to write them across this mask. Take up all the space, use any colors that you would like. And the next thing you'll want to do is to go up to a mirror, and I want you to hold this mask over your face in the mirror and take several minutes to really look at all the ways you've labeled and identified yourself. All these descriptors that you've used to identify yourself in the world, all those ego-based labels. And after you've done this for a few moments, I invite you to pull away the mask and look at yourself deep in the eyes. Look at all the beautiful curves of your face and think to yourself, how many of those are true? Do we ever really know who we are? And sometimes it takes thinking about who we are not to identify who we truly are. And I just want to say that, kind of in closing, that the ego will always try to convince you that you are alone, that you have to prove yourself, that you are not enough, but your soul knows the truth. It knows that you are whole, it knows that you are connected and here on purpose. The spell that we're trying to break here is the illusion of separation and the lie of imperfection. And when you live from a place where you make the choice, every action, every relationship starts to align with the truth of who you are, your true sense of self. And I just want to thank you again for joining me on this journey. And again, have a beautiful rest of your day. And remember, you're on purpose. You are the narrator of your story. So make it a fabulous one.